Hello, everybody. Welcome to the workshop. I'm just going to share my slides. Hi, everyone. So hopefully you are all here to do a workshop on the RSE landscape, and you're not in the wrong Zoom meeting. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to give you a little introduction to us. We are all members of trustees of the society, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about who we are, talk about why the society is running this workshop. We'll then look at a little bit of some RSE roles. What do we mean when we talk about an RSE role? How can we describe them? That should take about 10 minutes or so. We will then start looking at you guys and what is your RSE role. If you are an RSE, then we'll cover that. So we're going to have an interactive Mentimeter session for that. We'll then have a short comfort break. And in the second half of this workshop, we will be doing some exploring of different possible RSE personas, and we'll do that in breakout rooms, and we'll have a bit of feedback on that, and then we'll finish up by exploring and discussing what's next and where do we go. So, wanted to make sure that we all introduced ourselves first. So I will start. Hello, my name is Terry Forey. I am a trustee of the society. I have two jobs. In my full-time job, I am not an RSE. I am a software engineer with Wellcome Trust, and although the products and things that we are building are going to be used by researchers and they will be used for research, I currently feel that I am distanced to the point from the actual research itself that I can't call myself an RSE anymore. But in my part-time job, I am an RSE. And I do freelance RSE work, and that's a sort of fairly independent RSE. I'm not part of an embedded group. I'm not a central group. I'm just me on my own, running my own business, doing a few hours a week, working as an RSE. So that's me and my RSE role, or what it is. And I will move through the list and ask Marion if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Marion Weinziel, and I'm an RSE in the central group at Durham University. My background is in scientific computing, and I've worked as a postdoc before in a kind of embedded RSE role, and also 2 years in a startup in industry. I would see myself more on the research side of things, and would not call myself a software engineer without the research bit in front of it.
Paul, would you like to go next?
Hello, yes, so my name is Paul Richmond. I am a research software engineer at the University of Sheffield. I run the research software engineering group at Sheffield, and I'm also a senior lecturer, so I hold an academic position. So my background has very much been as a researcher, so I did a PhD and a postdoc. And it was always about kind of focus of kind of high performance computing technology. So I had one of the EPSRC RSE fellowships, which gave me a platform to kind of build upon that, and also to build the team that I now run at Sheffield. In terms of central and embedded, so the team that I have is the university's RSE team. So in that sense, it's central, but it's also embedded within an academic department, because we see it as kind of the application of software engineering. But it's very much on the research side. So I don't think there's any, including myself, I'm certainly somewhere in between. I see myself as somewhere in between, but I don't think that even anyone in my team would say that they were purely research or purely kind of software engineer either. So that is me.
Kirsty, do you want to go next? Oh, I think you're muted, we can't hear you. Sorry, I can't hear you. Anyone else jump in if you can hear Kirsty? Okay, we'll come back to Kirsty. Anya, would you like to go?
Shall I go? Yes. My name's Anya Brown. I'm an RSC at the University of Southampton. We could probably best be described as a central RSC group in that we do serve the whole university, but we're maybe a bit unusual in that we're entirely grant funded. And as with Paul, we're embedded in a department of the university. I don't have any specialization in terms of application domain, but I am specialized in terms of technology. My focus is mainly on HPC. And in terms of research or software engineering, I'd say I sit maybe like 2/3 towards the software engineering side. But things sort of something like research questions do come up for me occasionally in terms of studying parallel algorithms. That's me.
James?
Hi, I'm James. I'm part of the same group at Southampton as Anya, and also part of the Software Sustainability Institute. I see myself more towards the software engineering side of the scale than Anya, I think, where to the degree that occasionally I question whether I am actually an RSE or not, or should I just see myself as a software engineer. The type of projects I tend to pick up, I'm working with researchers who are more clients of the group than collaborators with the group, which is why I think sometimes maybe I'm not an RSE. I'm also starting to move into more sort of management of research software engineering gradually. So starting a slow migration away from actually working on software.
Ian?
Yeah, hi, Ian Cotton. I'm retired, but working as a trustee of the Society. Before retirement, just over a year ago, I led the research software engineering group at the University of Manchester. That's still going very strong without me, of course. It's a central group. It's quite large. Technically, it's part of Research IT at Manchester, and Research IT itself is part of IT services. So the team there are seen as professional support staff to some extent, although nearly everybody comes from a research background, and people are assigned to one or two research groups to help them develop their software. And even though I was managing the group as my last job there, I carried on right to the end, getting my hands dirty with some research software, perhaps too dirty as time went on. But yeah, so that's my my background, and I'm very interested to hear what everybody else has to say today. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Kirsty? No. Okay, Kirsty's going to type her introduction, and I will just say, because I actually meant to say this on the previous slide and I got distracted and forgot, that on watch as we are recording all this, please do, if you want to chime in with anything at any point, please do just unmute yourself, chat away to us. We're taking notes in the background, so anything you do say, we'll make a note of it. If you want to say something but you want to make sure you're not on the recording, put it into the chat and one of us will read it out. We'll get to Mentee meter session later, and obviously that we want to keep that very interactive as well, so please just keep interrupting us. There's no need to wait patiently for our question and answer moment. Just shout at us and we will respond, and we'll keep this as open room like as possible on Zoom. Kirsty, I think, are you still typing your introduction? Kirsty is a project manager at the Software Sustainability Institute and also an embedded RSC at Leeds. Background is academic. Was that the end of that sentence? Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, okay, so that is us, and we are all trustees of the Society, and the Society itself, you know, we want, as the Society, we want to better understand the RSC community, because there's huge diversity. There's diversity in us as trustees. If you just look at all the events that's happening at SeptembRSE, you can also see the huge diversity in what RSCs are doing, where they're based, what kind of career pathway they might have. And we want to make sure that we don't miss out on anybody. We don't accidentally exclude anybody who's either in the community or perhaps on the very edges of the community, and perhaps would appreciate being sort of brought in. And so thinking about not only who is our community, but who also do we want to reach out to as the society. And so we created an RSE World Diversity sort of working group, sort of a subgroup of trustees that have been sort of focusing on this. We ran a 30-minute session at a collaboration workshop back in the spring. And today is a sort of an expansion upon that 30 minutes, up to 2 hours, just to sort of explore a bit further about who our RSE community is, and really who you'd like it to be and how you'd like it to work, and what support and what the society can do to help you. So without anybody shouting at me that they want to say anything, I will carry on and talk about what is an RSE, because that's kind of what we're here. What is an RSE? And that you might have seen something like this before at different conferences and meetings. I know I've seen a version of this slide numerous times, where you've got software engineering on one side, you've got research on the other, and everybody says an RSE is somebody in the middle of this. So they care and work on both research and software engineering, and there's sort of this bridge or middle point between these two worlds or these two roles. And that's all very well and good, but what does this actually look like? Are we quite a broad range of people between software engineering and research? Are we very much a tight peak right in the middle of that? Or is our sort of community actually comprised of a whole bunch of people who are actually more interested in research and a bunch of people who are more interested in software engineering? And so this is kind of what we want to do in sort of exploring, where do people actually sit on this scale? Another thing that we're kind of exploring is different descriptions and words, and you would have heard some of my colleagues talking about these. So one of them is embedded. So an RSE that's embedded within a research group or team. The central RSE is an RSE perhaps who's in a sort of central group of other RSEs. So they might be working with multiple research fields. These terms might apply to you, all of these might apply to you, or they might be sort of conflicting in your role, who knows. There's the independent RSE, so someone who's neither central nor embedded, works as an RSE on their own terms. This could be like myself doing freelance work. This could be a fellow who has their own fellowship, their own money, kind of does their own thing within a university. We've got other terms and role and sort of descriptions about RSE roles. So for example, teaching, an RSE that focuses on teaching and training others. These could be researchers, could be other RSEs. We have academic RSEs, so people who are driving their own research agenda instead of actually supporting other people's research. And we've got RSEs, again, that are focused on management. Could be project management, could be team management, people management. But all these words could apply to RSEs, and it's sort of about how do we best describe ourselves and the RSE community. So is there any questions or anything that anybody wants to chime in with at this point?
There's a comment in the chat from Matthew West.
Yes, yeah, talking about recruiting individuals with skills that aren't normally found in the current crop of RSEs. And yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, in terms of what is an RSE and what do we include within the banner of RSEs, there's a variety of skills in there. And yeah, if we widen up the community, who can we potentially bring in that would enhance or help the community with providing new skills, knowledge, experience, or contacts? So yeah, it's all of the part of the reasons of why we want to do this. We're talking about the reality that skill types, front end, UX, back end, web apps, database, HPC, do exhibit demographic biases based on cultural perception of worthiness. Ooh, this is a sentence. And who the founding members were. Yeah, I think there are definitely differences. I'm not sure about cultural perceptions of worthiness. I think that's a tough one, because I think, well, I'm not even sure how to answer that. We could spend ages talking about the monetary value of RSEs versus other software engineers potentially, but maybe that's a discussion for another day. So I think what we'll do is we will get into Mentimeter. So I will ask everybody to please open up another browser window, a device, get your phones out. If you go to www.mentee.com and put in the code 53186392, you should hopefully hit this screen. And I will say for my fellow trustees, if you've not done this before and want to get involved, please feel free to. And I'm seeing some hearts come in, so hopefully people have found it. So that's www.mentee.com, and then the code is 53186392. And lovely, I'm seeing loads of hearts, yay. Okay, so we are going to start by, let me make sure I'm actually right, yay, talking about that research versus software engineering idea. So first question, do you consider yourself to be an RSC? Yes, no, don't know. Ooh, fabulous. I love it when we have some no's, because that means we have reached out to a broader audience than perhaps we might have expected from the initial sort of RSE conference. Is there anybody who said don't know would be willing to unmute and sort of share why they've said that?
Yeah, I can. I've just recently moved over into providing infrastructure for researchers to be able to actually do their research, specifically cloud workflows. So like a lot of research is happening because of the work I do, but I'm not actually doing the research.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are sort of that, it's almost like sysadmin, I suppose, in that sort of supporting role of the infrastructure, but not necessarily the research software itself. Is that right?
Yeah, although we do development of the software. I'm actually an open source infrastructure engineer, so the development is on tools like Jupyter Hub and upstream back into the community and such like that. So I'm a little bit shy of the word sysadmin.
Sorry.
Yeah, but like there's definitely aspects of that for sure.
Yeah, I think someone's also put in the chat, just discovered RSE, don't know if he speaks to me, don't think my skill level is sufficient yet to confidently declare myself an RSE. And that's a really interesting one. And I think we're going to come to that in the second half when we talk about the different personas and sort of level of what is an RSE.
So can I speak to that a little bit?
Jump in, James.
I'm still relatively early in my career, and I've quite consistently struggled with this imposter syndrome idea, where earlier, yeah, it was imposter syndrome. I'm not an RSE, my skills aren't ready to be an RSE yet. Then eventually overcome that and think, okay, I'm an RSE properly now. And I've just moved the imposter syndrome. I've just moved it to, oh, I'm not a real software engineer. I don't know if that's a thing you necessarily ever fully overcome. I haven't yet, but it's something to be aware of, and it's a very common thing.
Yeah, Anya?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that a little bit as well. I can certainly sympathize with feeling imposter syndrome, but I think I'd prefer that we talk about RSC not in terms of skill level, but in terms of sort of preferences for how much time or priority you'd like to be putting on software, because that's how we can most usefully help you. If you're interested, then training is useful to you, other community services are useful to you. It doesn't matter if you don't know all the things yet, you still can benefit from the RSE community, and I think should call yourself an RSE in that way.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think the initial definition of RSE that I saw was interested in both good software and good research. And so I think if you're interested in it and that's what you want to do, then you should consider yourself an RSE. But that's my opinion. And this is why we're doing this workshop, to gather your opinions as well. So next question is, what is your relationship with software? So we've got a number of different options here. So we've got everything from I write simple scripts, writing complex software programs, maintaining others' code. You just use software, you don't use software, you train people to write or use software, you manage software products or other. And yet you can answer more than one. So tick all the boxes that apply. Let everybody have a moment or two to fill that in. A lot of people saying they train, which is interesting.
Just a question about Terry, can you elaborate on what managed software products means from the chat?
Question on that. Yes, managing software products. So I suppose when I was writing this, I was thinking in terms of product manager kind of role. Yeah, mostly sort of product manager, people who are managing its construction perhaps and involved in the team that way. Does that answer it? Not so much of a sort of admin within the product. Cool, so we've got lots of people writing what they would call simple scripts, or lots of people doing training, a couple of people who don't use software at all, which is really interesting. For the guys who wrote other, is there anything you'd like to sort of share with us that we didn't include?
So I was one of those, and by that I included things like Sarah mentioned of managing research infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Keep forgetting infrastructure on this list. Anybody else want to share anything from the other? Or something in the chat? Review software and provide feedback to others on its quality. Yeah, that's a good one. That's not actually, we didn't put that. Cool. Okay, thanks, guys. So similar question, what is your relationship with research? And we've got a bunch of options here talking about, do you have your own research questions, supporting others' research, not involved in any research? And we have another other bracket. And again, for anybody who said other, would you like to share?
Yeah, again, on managing infrastructure, sometimes optimization problems can feel like an open-ended research question, and figuring out what the best infrastructure is for the problem that your research community are trying to solve.
Yeah, that's a good point. I certainly remember that when I was back in the day when I was a bioinformatician, and everyone would say, "Oh, what is the pipeline that we just run this DNA sequencing data through?" In this case, well, that's actually part of the research, is to discover and to work on and find those, answer those questions yourselves. And it's not just throw it at the machine. Yeah, we've got another second for the infrastructure point. Okay, so, but most people here are definitely supporting others' research in potentially instead of having their own research questions, which I think is interesting. And one person's not involved in any research. So on that scale, software engineering on one side, research on the other side, I'm going to ask you, where would you put yourself, considering that the original idea was an RSE was bang in the middle, on your day-to-day activities, your interest level, and your career goal? So anything that where you would, where would you like to be career-wise? Oh, we're seeing some things come in. Cool. So looking like in terms of your day-to-day activity, it definitely seems to be heading towards the software engineering side. Whereas in terms of interest levels, there's a good hump over by research. Career goals seems, to me anyway, more central. People are still putting these in. Give it a couple more minutes. So, I mean, for me, looking at this looks really interesting because it seems like people are doing a lot of software engineering on their day-to-day activity, whereas their interest and potentially career goals are slightly more centralized between engineering and research. So are people not doing as much research as they might be wanting to do? Which is interesting. Cool. And sort of last question on this section is, what do you prioritize? So we've got a bunch of choices here. Supporting others, could be any kind of support, answering research questions, producing good software, driving change for RSEs, or product/people management. You should be able to sort those into what do you prioritize. Good software was first, but it's been beaten by supporting others. Oh, it looks like it might be more, might be coming back in. So we've got currently, first is supporting others. Then we've got producing good software, answering research questions, driving change for RSCs, and then product or people management. And I think that's interesting because I think supporting others, obviously it's quite vague, but I'm quite happy to see, well, not maybe me just being happy, but aren't we lovely people if that's a higher priority than producing good software and answering research questions? We're a very supportive community, which is lovely to see. So has anybody got any questions or anything they want to raise at this point, thinking about those Mentimeter questions we just had? And there's a bit of a chat. Oh, yes, Matthew West, go for it.
One thing on priority wise, I guess, is that, and I tried to answer that in terms of like what I'm currently doing in my day-to-day job. But is that, I guess I feel like priorities like right now is different than like what I would prioritize if I had, you know, full control over my time in my career, or like in 10 years time sort of situation. So like, and I'd be probably more interested in, you know, people management and various other things, but I don't have any control over anybody else but myself right now. So that's going to be down on the list.
Yeah. No, I think for everybody, those priorities are potentially going to shift throughout people's careers, and that is worth noting. But you answered it as to what your priorities are now. There's a lovely comment in the chat here. I'll just read it out for the recording, which is someone interpreted supporting others as dealing with the tickets in a bug tracker. And if I had more time to produce better software, there might be fewer bugs to fix, which I think is brilliant. So the next question is, or section is about where do you work? And this is going into that embedded and central and questions like that. So first of all is, are you in an RSC group? So that is a group of RSCs. Yes, no, you lead a group, which is subtly different, or don't know. Cool, so most people here seem to be in an RSC group. although it's not everybody, which is really good to know. We've got a couple of group leaders. Nobody's unsure, which I think is a good sign, as to whether they know whether they're RSE group or not. So next question is, where are you based? And we might have missed some others, so there is another field here, but we've got in a research group or department, in IT services, in a centralized group, which is not in IT services, in a university, self-employed, a national lab or center in industry, and a non-academic institute and other. So the sort of, yeah, specific, oh, we're going straight into the others. Non-academic institute. The people who've said other, is there anything that you'd like to share? I think Sarah put in non-profit into the chat, which could count as a non-academic institute potentially, but I don't know. Would you feel it didn't?
I mean, we are, yeah, not really. We're like providing a product to universities, right? Where the product is managing Jupyter hubs for people who don't have the time or resources to learn that themselves.
Cool. So it's good. So we have people who are not in university, which I think is really good, because I think we should be a larger community than just people in higher education institutes. We've got a perfect mix of people in central groups and in research groups and departments, one person in IT services. So this is a real mixture. And I think this goes to show just that all the variety of where RSCs are and the diversity of it. So we gave you these terms at the beginning, and I'd like to ask you, on a sort of sliding scale, how do you relate to these terms? How relevant is each one of these words that we ran through at the beginning? How do you relate to them? And of course, you might be, completely central or completely embedded, or some sort of weird mix between the two. And this is kind of what we want to find out here. Okay. Central is sort of sticking out most at the moment.
There's a question in the chat about what's meant by academic, whether that's...
Yes, so that's having your own research, sort of driving your own research program. That's kind of the description we had at the introduction, which you might have missed. No worries. So it's definitely looking like central. If you're going to compare embedded versus central, people are certainly looking more central. I mean, we are going to break this down and analyze the results afterwards. So we will look at this in more detail than what this graph is currently providing. But it's cool to see that there's some other independent people out there. Seems relatively easy, even between teaching management and academic. So it's a little bit hard to tell from this graph, but we will look in, like I said, we'll look into this in more detail later on, where we can break all these answers down one by one and see exactly what you scored it. So thanks, guys. And now thinking about how people have actually employed, what kind of contract do you have? So we've got the options here of fixed term, a sort of permanent contract, a 0 hours contract, an open-ended contract, or we've got the ever-present other. So open-ended, in terms of, might be based on funding or something like that, as in it's going to stay open until we're at a set date of it will be finished in 2 years, but it is dependent upon other things, whereas permanent is obviously you've got a permanent job. Just the answer in the chat there. I've got one other. Would the person who said other like to shout out about what kind of contract they have?
Yeah, it's me again. It's because 2ITC has its financial home in the US. So under British law, I'm actually self-employed. But then I'm also like hired as a permanent member of staff, but we're also a startup, which means we don't know where our money's coming from yet. So it's kind of also in the open-ended bracket. And also if 2ITC does their job properly, in a few years we'll make ourselves redundant as well. So it's like a whole mix of like a lot of factors.
Yeah, that sounds like a complicated mix. But yeah, no, really good to see we've got a completely even split between fixed term and permanent, no 0 hours, which makes me happy, certainly. A couple of open-ended, and then yeah, Sarah, with your whole complicated mix of contracts, people and countries. Okay, cool. So following on from that, how are you appraised? So if you have a sort of annual review or something like that, are you appraised within a sort of a wider scheme? So for example, within professional services, academic, a sort of technical career ladder scope, or administrative? I put in individually as well, because I know some people get appraised on a very much one-to-one without any sort of wider departmental or sort of other kind of goals and things like that. And if you don't have any kind of appraisal process, approval process, don't worry about it. Okay. Coming through. I'm liking to see the individually in the one-to-one sort of based without being part of a specific track.
I was one of the people who said individually. In principle, we're on the researcher track, but the university just doesn't define any process for that other than a one-to-one with your line manager. Oh, okay. So there's no impetus on publications or bringing in certain amounts of funding or anything like that, which might otherwise be on a sort of academic/research. They separate academic and researcher. So really? Lecturers or academics, they have research income and those kind of goals, but researchers are basically postdocs and now RSEs. And I guess because they only expect you to be in a project for a short period of time or something, they don't bother putting any central targets. So your targets are all agreed between you and your line manager. Okay, cool. No, that's interesting. That's a good one. I mean, certainly my experience of being in research was you were always under the academic thing as a postdoc, and you didn't have your own thing. You were just sort of a lower career grade, if that makes sense. Cool. So there's definitely a fairly even mix between professional service and academic. We're going to look later to see how that matches up with your contract type, and I'm sure it's going to be interesting. So I put this in. This is sort of new for those who came to our collaborations workshop version of this. Questions about how are you funded, and I'm sort of wondering what proportion of your salary, if you know, comes from research funding, and that's a sort of currently what's the actual realistic value that's actually coming in from research funding. And then the sort of ideally, and that might be your own personal ideally, or that might be the ideal of your particular group or things like that. Oh, ideally less than what's current, what your proportion of your salary is current from funding. So this is certainly looking like people are
currently getting a higher proportion of their salary from research funding than they would ideally. Which as people is, oh yes, no, this question is potentially very complicated. As Jez has mentioned, which is getting lots of +1s in the chat, a lot of people would ideally have a secure job with central funding, not dependent on research funding. And yeah, I think that's a very good point. Yes, if you could have your salary not coming from research funding, would it be more secure? And that's certainly what people in the chat are suggesting. Cool, that's really interesting. And then we've got sort of an open, feel free to type some words in here. Which funding agencies have you been funded by? And I think you can put in 5 different answers. I think it might be 3 or 5 different answers. So we're just kind of curious if people are all getting funded by the same group, or if it's a complete mix of different funding agencies. The EPSRC is winning right now. SCFC. A selection of acronyms I haven't heard of before, which is cool. WIFO. Don't know. Perfectly reasonable. Local research organisations. BBSRC. Does someone mind telling me what AHRC is? Because I'm not familiar with that one.
That's Arts and Humanities.
Sweet. Arts and Humanities Research Council. Oh, that's brilliant. So we've got some commission. MRC. ERC is European Research Council. What's the WEFO? WEFO, I want to call it. That's probably wrong.
That's the Welsh European Funding Office.
Oh. Okay, that's really interesting. So it's looking like EPSAC is sort of the biggest funder, but there's also a good range across different topics there, like the sort of Scientific Council, BBSRC, AHRC. That's good, thanks guys. And a couple more things going into the chat as well, thank you. And then just thinking about in terms of the grant applications themselves, how have you been involved, if anything? So you're sort of, and I sort of separated up yes into you were a named author / co-applicant, or whether you were just involved but in writing it or editing it, but you weren't named, not involved at all, as in it just happened and then you just got given some money, or it's just not applicable, or we have other as well. So this is looking at most people here have certainly been involved on some level in the actual grant applications. A couple of people haven't. Yeah, and so when I say named, it could be so someone who's named on it, who might be sort of a part of the grant but isn't perhaps a co-applicant. But named as in that specific person will be doing this work. So the majority of people are saying yes, and they were named on the grant application itself. Then we've got people who were involved but not named. Only 2 people have not been involved at all in the grant application process, or at least not in the way that we've been talking about it. In terms of the other, does anybody want to shout out what they?
I guess it's that I'm currently trying to work through, and it's some grant application, but is that this is also sort of like in my own free time and not really any particular support currently.
Yeah. Not sort of part of the job role, I suppose, in that way. Cool. Thanks, guys. So final couple of questions, and hopefully these aren't too scary. If the term RSC didn't exist, what would you call yourself? So if you couldn't call yourself an RSE, yeah, postdoc, software engineer, research developer, physicist programmer, scientist, researcher, data manager, physicist programmer, yeah, computational physicist, infrastructure engineer. Is that a wizard emoji? Fantastic. Research data manager, research scientist. Oh, cool. So there's, even though software engineer seems to be the most popular, all the other ones seem to distinctly say research at some point in them, or at least imply it. Well, infrastructure engineer as well. Open sourcer is a great one. Service manager, technical officer. Okay, so these are really good sort of selection of sort of potential titles. We've got some scientific application support officer coming into the emoji. Oh, wizard emoji was supposed to be alongside something else. Although I feel like the wizard emoji should just stand on its own. Or with the open sorcerer, yeah, would make sense. But it's okay, so software engineer, it seems to be the big one, followed by researcher and then postdoc. Cool, guys, that's really interesting. There's a comment in the chat about technical officer is we didn't know what to call this person on the grant application job title. It is certainly quite vague in some ways. So next question, how secure do you feel in your current employment or in your career progression? Well, and in your career progression. So do you feel like you have job security in your current employment and security in your career progression and where you're going to go? Someone's saying, yes, I have loads of job security until my contract ends. So obviously this is a very sort of, you know, this is how you feel kind of question. Career progression is definitely low. That is less than 50% there. And that is definitely something that we as a society need to look at. But current employment, I'm very happy to say, is nearly 80% secure. Ooh, I think that's pretty much everyone. So yes, so definitely current employment, people are fairly secure, although there are a couple of no answers there. But in terms of career progression, it's definitely under 50% for the majority of people here. And that is interesting. Concerning, but interesting. And the sort of last question that we have is, it's an open text one, so feel free to write in. What support do you want from the society? And I think you can put in 3 different answers for this if you'd like. So what support do you want from the society? Oh, there's a lovely comment in the chat I'll read out as well about the previous question while people are typing away, which was, started feeling more secure about my career progression / future after discovering RSE, which is great. Mentoring, but we're already doing that. Yay! Yay, indeed. Yes, we have started our mentoring program. Hopefully you're all there for the induction talk last week. Yeah, like to see embedded RSCs not getting left behind in the central group push. Absolutely. This is another reason why we are running these workshops, because we want to understand where our embedded RSCs are and how we can support them. Standard job templates for RSCs at different levels. Mentoring has been mentioned again. There's a plug for mentoring in the chat. Love to learn more from the RSCs who are freelancing either 100% or alongside other work. That's a good point. There is a hashtag freelancing channel in the Slack chat if you want to reach out to any of us. Ensure that mid and late career roles are available at all universities. That would be a good one, wouldn't it? Evidence and examples, give them senior management of how we can create secure jobs and career progression for RSEs. I think that's something we've had, so getting some documentation and examples together. Cookie cutter template for career progression structure. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Yeah, love it. Advocacy and policy formation for RSE career pathways. How do I become more RSE? That's an interesting question. We can definitely think about that. More about alternative or post RSE career options. Training, perhaps even certification. There's the mentorship and community for both career progression and technical best practices. Greater recognition of RSE to make it easier for me to explain myself to potential employers. Got assistance with RSE funding proposals, those not connected to specific research projects. Migrating into leadership roles. Yeah, definitely. I think these are all things that we have on our sort of radar, but these are definitely brilliant things that we can do as a society to try and support you and the whole community. Oh, there's another one coming in. Funding for research software maintenance becoming standard for funders. Yes, that's a big thing that I'm massively keen on getting more funding for software maintenance. Keep doing what you're doing. Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Anything else? This is the end of it, by the way. So I think what I'll do is I'll just leave this slide open. So if anybody else wants to put anything in, they can do. But at this point, we'll sort of come back to this. So what we're going to do next is, well, first of all, we're going to have a short break. But before everybody runs away, I will say that what we're going to do in the next hour is we're going to start having a look through some different RSC personas. So I'll introduce you to a whole bunch of, I've run away, of different personas, such as this one. We've come across with some sort of imaginary people in different roles, and we'll go into breakout rooms and discuss what this person might want and who they are and are they an RSE. But we'll do that when we come back. So I'll say if we can come back at 3:02, that would be wonderful. So feel free to go grab some water. I will stop screen sharing for now. I know I'm going to go get some water. And yeah, feel free to either leave the thing or just turn yourself, stop your video and go on to mute. And we'll be back at 3:02. Hello, we're back. This time I'm unmuted. So I was distracted doing other things in the background. Let me go back into sharing my slides and we will carry back on. I'm just going to share this window and then we want to go into this tab. Okay, so RSC Personas. Hopefully everybody is back in the room now. So what are RSC Personas? Like I said, so at the beginning, or just before the break, we've come up with these sort of profiles of potential people who you might or might not consider to be an RSE, and what we're going to do is start exploring them. So we've got 7 of them in total. So our first person is Rianne, who is a postdoc, and I won't read all of this in any detail because you can look at it in detail, specifically in the breakout rooms, but Rianne is primarily a researcher, but has also written software and shared those through publications with other researchers. We then have Leonard, who is a researcher interested in software and its impact. He runs a group of RSEs. We then have Amrit. Amrit is an RSE based in a central group working with researchers across the Institute. We then have Claudia. Claudia works in the Met Office, creating and maintaining software alongside her scientist colleagues. She considers herself an engineer. We have Owen. Owen is an RSE specialist in humanities. He is based in a research group, but supports other researchers across the department. We've got Jennifer, who is a full stack software developer. Jennifer works for a commercial company that builds software to support research, part of a team of developers and data scientists. And then we have, last person is Kai, and Kai works at a national supercomputing center. They support researchers in porting their applications to the HPC, getting the best performance and sorting out problems in the process. So these are our RSE personas. And what we'd like you to do is I am going to open up some breakout rooms in just a second. And then I would like you to sort of, for each one of these breakout rooms and each persona, consider, would you consider this person to be an RSE? Do you think this person is currently a member of the community? Do you think the society currently supports this person? What support from the community and society could this person potentially need? And lastly, what could they add to the community? But really just sort of explore this RSE persona. These questions are really just sort of guidance. You don't need to sort of answer them all strictly. And just sort of have a look at what they could add to the community. Now, I believe that, so we have, oh no, so here's our list of breakout rooms. So I think Kirsty has had to run off for childcare reasons. So I would say we don't have a sort of a volunteer who can moderate room number 3, which is Amrit. Amrit is our central RSE though, so I feel like he might be the least interesting person potentially to look at. So feel free, I'm going to open all the rooms. So everybody should get an option to move into a breakout room. And we will share a link in the chat to all of the Google Docs. Let me find. Everybody meeting, paste that into there. So hopefully you should see in the chat a whole bunch of links to all of the profiles. Feel free to put yourself into all of the rooms. If you don't know which room to go into, just pick one that's got the fewest people in it. Hopefully our moderators are moving in again. And which profile is missing? Oh, this is all going well. So we've got the link should work for Amrit. No, it didn't because I'm copying and pasting it from Google Docs. So let me just put Amrit is this link. So how is this working? Most people have not moved into a breakout room. I'm going to be in the Rianne room, but I'd like to make sure that everybody's happy and has moved into a room before I do it. So you should have in Zoom, you should have the option, if I stop sharing my screen, in the breakout room section at the bottom to move into a room. So what we're going to do, 20 minutes in each room, and then we'll flip out, which I should have said earlier before people started moving.
So, Terry, I'm clicking on breakout rooms at the bottom.
Yeah.
But I don't see the option to actually join one.
Ah, okay. Does it tell you?
You have to you need to hover over the number. So it says like Jennifer 1, and if you hover over the 1, it turns into a join.
Right, let me try that. Yeah. Oh yeah, thanks very much. Yes.
I'm
new at this. Yeah.
If anyone else is having problems, I can assign you to a room. So I might start doing that in just a second. If people haven't picked a room, and Chris, if you can give us 20 minutes and then kick us all back out again, that would be lovely. All right, I'm gonna join. Just give it a minute for everybody to come back, and then we'll basically do a big shuffle and everyone can go into a different room, except for us who are moderating the sessions.
It's always too short. There's always more to discuss.
On the plus side, you get to go again in like 2 minutes. So yeah, I think everybody is nearly back. My breakout rooms thing is still showing lots of people in rooms, including myself being in a room that I know I'm not in. Should be the rooms are closed. Okay, cool. So so hopefully that was an interesting starter, and you got to know and think about one of the RSE profiles. We're now going to have another 20 minutes where I would suggest you pick a different RSE profile, pick a different persona, something completely different. And yeah, we shall see how we go for another 20 minutes. Is that all good with everybody? Rooms have been reopened. If you're back into the same room, feel free to leave the breakout room and join another one. If not, we shall carry on, hopefully with different people. Hi guys, welcome back. Hopefully that was good and that was helpful and interesting. What I'm going to ask is, we only got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to ask if each of the moderators could give us a super quick overview of what went down in their groups. And I know we had no official moderator for the for AMRIT, so we might just skip that one for the interest of time, because we have all of your notes and documents. So thank you very much for that. So I will quickly share my screen again, and I will ask, which window is it? I think it's this window. Actually no, I'm first, so I shall start. I'll give a very quick overview of Rianne. So I'm actually going to have to share the notes because I can't do too many things at once. So in Rianne, we talked about if we considered this person to be an RSE because they're writing software, they're sharing software, and they're interested in best practices for the software they write. So we kind of explored why Rianne doesn't consider herself an RSE, and we talked about maybe it's imposter syndrome and not feeling like they have the right skills. Maybe it's a lack of confidence. We talked about this person might be a sort of lurker in the community, but not actively engaging because they don't consider themselves to be an RSE. We also talked about the society might be supporting this person, but again, not directly, because they might not be willing to engage and go through things. And we also talked about, I'm not sure if I said that or not, they're not willing to engage might be because they perceive an RSE as being a centralized group only, and it feeling like it's a move away from research and not something that they want to do. But we talked about, in terms of training and support, that's probably what they would most want from the community and society, which might be domain-specific training, or it could be sort of more generalized training. Also seeing case studies of people be moving in and out of academia and back into academia might be sort of comforting to them. And sort of that raising awareness and understanding that an RSE is not necessarily turning to the dark side and away from research. And that they might add all sorts of things into the community, including some sort of interesting problems, links to the experts and the domains, ways of raising awareness and reaching out to other postdocs and PhD students, and just a solid understanding of what is going on at the research coalface. And that was Rhiannon. So I will ask whoever was looking after Leonard, if you could please give us a quick overview.
Yeah, that's me. So Leonard's the associate professor who's an academic, obviously, but runs a group of RSEs and is an RSE leader, has a prominent position in the community. And the first question asked, is this person an RSE? And we decided, yes, they definitely are, as one hat they wear. Someone said, would you consider the Vice Chancellor an RSE? Because eventually they have RSEs working for them, you know, but that chain is just a bit too long, I think. Is Leonard the kind of person that's currently a member of the community? Yeah, as described, yes, they are, but there's quite a bit of variation from, you know, academics like Leonard to other academics. They definitely bring leadership to the community. We think the society supports people like Leonard by helping to raise the idea about RSE career paths, helps them to find more people to join the group. And in fact, it's a kind of two-way, mutually beneficial thing. Sorry if you can hear some cat noises in the background. I think one of my cats is struggling. So we think the society might be able to help Leonard's with what kind of business case they might need to read, how to lobby government and named individuals with who to speak to, and perhaps how to be more strategic. And similarly within the institution. So I guess in the interest of time, I'll stop there. I'll hand back to you, Tara.
Thanks, Ian.
Okay.
That was interesting. We shall skip Amrit, I'm afraid, but he is in our central group, so we'll probably have a better understanding of him anyway. And look at Claudia. Paul,
that was me, yeah. So Claudia, yeah, so we thought she was almost certainly a research software engineer. So she sits alongside a scientist colleague. So it depends what she does when she sits alongside them. So, you know, if she's just in a shared office, but perhaps working on commercial products for the Met Office, she might not, you know, see herself very much involved in the R side of RSE. So it depends very much for herself as to what the size of that R is and how she kind of identifies with it. But given we know the Met Office and what they do, we kind of said it's unlikely that there's many people that don't have some involvement in research. So she's almost certainly an RSE. Do we think of her currently as a member of the community? We'd very much like her to be. From the description, it says that she doesn't really engage. I think that's probably true or we thought, sorry, that this is probably true of other government organisations as well, but it's really a matter of perception rather than the society or the community specifically excluding them. And it's that matter of perception which is really something that the community and the society needs to change. And there are things that we definitely can do to do that, mostly around, you know, the the message that we give. So publicity examples, things like the RSE podcast are a really good example of demonstrating some of the diversity, but there's definitely more that we could do, more publicity. We could target specific government organisations, or perhaps have champions within specific organisations that will help. So one of the things we picked out was perhaps the Cullen Centre, where we've had one of our former presidents runs the RSE group there, and that it's almost certainly going to help people identify with the society and with the community, given that they've got like a champion within that organisation. We thought that there was a lot that Claudia could benefit from in our community, in terms of they could benefit from from us in terms of technical skills and sharing. There are aspects to do with kind of engagement with research software, engagement with researchers, and kind of some of the soft skills as well that perhaps people working in higher education would be able to share with Claudia. And likewise, there's some really good stuff that Claudia is likely to do in the Met Office that we don't get opportunity to with higher education RSEs. So things like professionalism around group software development, where they're maintaining products, working with people like product managers, which is something that doesn't tend to happen so much within academic RSE groups. So that kind of sharing of knowledge would be hugely useful. And then the last note that I'll just point out is that there was a couple of people who felt that some of the personas didn't particularly fit them that well. I know that we can only have so many, but the ones that particularly kind of fell through the gaps were people who are perhaps data stewards or more infrastructure oriented, which have very similar challenges around career progression, but don't necessarily identify with the term software in RSE.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we need to think about. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Owen, I can't remember who was.
Owen, this was me. Thanks very much for everyone who had a chat with me about this. Sorry about my very messy notes. Please go into the document and correct anything that you think needs correcting or adding. So Owen self-identifies as a research software engineer, and we agreed that for almost all cases like that, we should accept that that person is a RSE. In terms of being currently a member of the community, while Owen, again, is described as being an active member of the community, we did hear the point that in general, for people in the humanities, it might be very difficult to find common ground with the majority of the RSE community, which can appear very sort of science focused, very HPC focused, and that existing communities, such as the digital humanities, are also sort of shifting maybe away from RSE to be more focused on writing software, using software than writing it. So it can be difficult for people in the humanities to currently find their sort of RSE niche. In terms of the society supporting this person, while we agreed that the society might support the person, the universities certainly do not currently support people in an embedded RSE role. The problem of having a fixed term contract, of spending all your time writing software, but being judged completely on academic outputs, and universities not knowing what to do with people that have multiple roles. It felt like at least there was the opportunity to move to a central group and have some career security that way, but it would involve giving up something, which is the sort of the domain specialization and the benefit of that, which is something that obviously embedded RSEs likely enjoy, given that that's the choice that they've made to work really closely with a particular domain. And in terms of support from the community and the society, we considered more domain-specific SIGs along themes for people who were looking for kind of domain-specific communities to fit into. Really important to have software recognized as a research output to try to allow RSEs to have some career progression without having to leave and go to a central group, and more support for people at the beginning of their journey in terms of the skills who maybe software engineering skills who maybe weren't exposed to programming in undergrad. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Anya. Next up was Jennifer.
Okay, so we sort of, the point we started off with, that there is plenty of research and research adjacent activities happening outside of academia, both in industry and public sector institutions. But the question of whether are you an RSE is really, from this side at least, to what degree do you support research? So whether you're an RSE or a software engineer, and how closely do you work with the researchers? So we're not sure whether she's an RSE, whether we consider her to be an RSE. That would depend on how her company works, how the research culture of the company is, and to what degree she interacts with researchers outside the company as well. We thought that the line between RSE and researcher might be easier to move across than the line between software engineer and researcher, because those roles both typically exist within the same organization and are more similar, perhaps. We thought she probably wasn't a member of our community already. We didn't think she would come to an event like SeptembRSE without an existing link to the community. She wouldn't have heard of it, but even if we'd invited her, we thought that she probably still wouldn't come. And we also thought that she's not really looking for support from a community. She's looking to support a community, both because that is what the profile says she thinks is important. She thinks it's important to have good quality software in research. But also her role in the company, it's likely to be quite important that she interacts with the researchers who that product is for, which may or may not be part of our community. If the sort of the product was designed to be used by research software engineers, then absolutely this would be the community for her to be part of. But if it's a more domain specific product, then it would probably better suit her to be a member of the community around that domain. And that was what we thought.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. We have one more, which is Kai.
Yep. Kai was an interesting one because there was a bit of a controversial twist on that. They wondered why the RSE community as such exists, and why whether that's not what people have done for a long time already in the HPC community. We had I had two very different conversations on this topic, one with someone from the HPC community and one with people who are not that much in the HPC community. So it seems that there is a bit of an RSE HPC divide, where some people might feel that, okay, the two communities don't belong together, and especially people from the HPC community think they are much more advanced and much more well established. And this person, so it wasn't quite clear. So is the second question about, do you think the person is currently a member of the community, does that mean they engage with the community? And for this person, it means probably not, but they would probably or could belong under the term RSE, but there are also all the platforms people and the sysart people in the HPC community, and so who might really benefit from a network or community such as the RSE community. For the question of whether the society currently supports this person, it was felt that yes, but Kai probably doesn't realize that. There are things like the HPC channel on Slack and so on, where they can be part of the community. And there's also the special interest group that's not under the society, but it feels like, yeah, the HPC community is very established. And as I said, so at some point these two communities overlap and some not. So the question about what support would they benefit from, maybe not need, but benefit from, we thought things like networking, things like having a bit younger and more diverse community, such as the RSE community, might actually be a good thing, because HPC is a bit slow and a bit top-down led as well. And then there are other things like, okay, access to best practices and broadening of the user community, and also discussions about role champion and career progression. Another interesting point was that the entry point to HPC is probably very high, and it would be great if basically the RSE community could help to lower that entry point. Generally, also what they could add to the community is this conversation about best practices and technologies and so, but also they might have fought some of the battles, for example, for permanent contracts and so already. So that might be a point where they could basically be a role model. And then we had kind of a bit of a general discussion. So I needed to add other thoughts on the bottom of that document, because we had discussions about, okay, so where does cloud computing belong to in this? So is it part of HPC, or do RSEs use more cloud than HPC people and so? And do we want the communities to align and to do more together? Should there be HPC RSE events like the workshop at the supercomputing that's run? So should the society do these events, or are the communities actually closer together than they think? And then one question that came up was also, is the RSE community trying to be too nice? So do we actually need to welcome them in again and again if they feel they don't need us? And is it not maybe, so if they think, okay, so they are way ahead and they are, they don't need us, so why do we need to run after them and try to get them basically on our side?
Yeah, I love that. That's a very good point. Where do we call the boundaries? Cool, thanks so much, guys. That was absolutely brilliant. So just to finish this off, because I know we are overrunning, so apologies for that. I would just say we are going to have a little bit of a deep dive on all of this, all of your outputs, all of your conversations. They've been absolutely brilliant. You've given us so much information. Thank you so much. We're going to have a look at that as the RSE World Diversity Working Group. And we're going to make sure that it gets fed back into all the things that the society gets up to in terms of events and activities. I will say that if you want to contribute to our case studies, please do get in touch. Go onto the website, you'll see our new case studies. We're starting some new case studies and starting to add them up. If you think you have a particularly interesting career path that you would like to tell us about and you think would be a good case study, please do let us know. We're going to try and open up a sort of more interactive survey on RSE roles that we can keep running, and so people can keep sort of putting in what kind of role and what terms suit them, and we'll try and get that out as soon as possible. Anything else that any of my fellow trustees want to add at this point? No? Okay, in which case, thank you all so much. You are absolutely brilliant. Thank you to all of my fellow trustees for helping out. Thank you to everybody who came along and answered some questions. You were brilliant.
Thank you for your hard work, Terry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I hope that was interesting. Thanks, guys.
Ciao, everyone. Thank you.